of the Estopanol College of Architecture and Planning at Ball State University. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today and throughout the CAP virtual lecture series this year. In particular, we're encouraged that hundreds of friends and alumni have been tuning in from around the state and the country during this season. And although we miss gathering in AV 100 with a guest speaker and all the interactions that go along with that, there have been some advantages to this new way of doing things. It's hard to imagine, for example, that we could have persuaded 5 busy Chicago architects to drive to Muncie for a day, but here we are, able to spend time with all 5 alumni to get a well-rounded picture of how Landon Baker, a dynamic Chicago firm, is not only producing great architecture, but is truly changing community fabric in a very positive way. Our theme in the CAP guest lecture series this spring has been focused on social and environmental justice. Landon Baker is a great leader in the concept that good design should be available to all. We're also grateful that 2 of the firm's principals, Catherine Baker and Jeff Bone, give back by serving on CAP advisory boards, helping us to stay connected to best practices and shared principles. We have 2 more lectures to go after this one. Julie Kaufman of Fixed Development in Milwaukee on March 22nd, and Carolyn Coleman of the League of California Cities on April 12th. You can write to CAP lectures at bsu.edu to get a link to listen live, or head to our College of Architecture and Planning YouTube channel afterward to watch a recording. Now I'm going to hand things over to Andrea Schwartz, Chair of the Department of Architecture, who will tell you more about today's guests. Andrea.
Thank you, Dave, and welcome everybody. We are excited to have all of you here, and I'm going to just run through a brief bio of each participant. We're excited to see your work. Jeff Bone, FAIA, is a partner at Landon Baker. He received his Bachelor of Architecture degree from Ball State. He has nurtured the firm's grassroots approach to help nonprofit clients translate their visions into realities. In his extensive record of volunteer leadership, Jeff has also served on the City of Chicago's Code Committee, the Chicago AIA Education Committee, the Design for Aging Committee, and he is a volunteer architect for Home Free Home, a national nonprofit providing pro bono architectural design services for accessibility. He is also a member of our advisory board at the department level. Catherine Baker, FAIA, is also a partner at Landon Baker. She received her Bachelor of Architecture degree from Ball State and a Master of Arts in Social Sciences from the University of Chicago. She notes that both disciplines, architecture and social science, share some fundamental underpinnings that pertain to the work of Landon Baker. These are understanding people, understanding problems, making connections, and developing programmatic solutions. She has volunteered extensively in Chicago high schools and at the Chicago Architecture Center in programs introducing students to architecture and design. She serves on the college's Alumni Executive Board. Jack Schroeder, AIA, is a principal at Landon Baker. He received his Bachelor of Architecture degree from Ball State. As an architect, Jack has focused on the design of multifamily housing, completing both affordable and market rate projects in Chicago as well as downstate Illinois. Jack has learned to approach every project with optimism, enthusiasm, and inclusiveness. His extensive knowledge of green building practices and progressive city planning has helped the firm minimize the environmental impact of their projects while improving the quality of life for the residents. Kate Lanagascher Cichon earned a AIA and lead AP, earned a Bachelor of Arts with a major in architecture and a minor in Spanish, and a Master of Architecture degree from Ball State. In her studies as an architect, she explores the link between architecture and social opportunity in order to discover ways in which the built environment can have a positive impact both on people and the natural environment. And finally, Tad Jamiefield is a licensed architect who holds a Master of Architecture degree from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and a Bachelor of Science degree from Ball State. During his time at Ball State, Tad traveled abroad to Southeast Asia to study in India and Nepal, where he developed a love for socially mindful design in urban settings. Landon Baker Architects believes good design should be available to everyone, as Dave said. With their clients and other stakeholders, Landon Baker co-creates inventive, inviting, and sustainable spaces and places that transform lives, revitalize neighborhoods, and regenerate cities. Their mission is to provide architecturally significant yet affordable options to as many people as possible. Their belief that good design is for everyone is the underpinning of their work. Today, we're going to see some examples of that philosophy applied. If anyone has questions during or at the end, put them in the chat, please. And I'll hand it over now to Jeff Bone. Thank you again.
Andrea, thanks so much. And Dave, thank you very much. And we're super excited about this opportunity. And I think it was last fall, Dave kind of threw it out there and asked us if we'd be interested in doing that. And, right off the bat, it was like, yes. But then we realized, hey, we've actually got a few Ball State grads in the office. So I think that we wanted to approach this as a tag team and really, have all of us do a presentation. So we've kind of got 5 different projects that we're all going to talk about. I'm just going to do a brief intro, and then we can kind of roll right into that. But I think that we're really happy. We've got, if you look at the dates, it looks like I'm the oldest. Oops. It looks like it spans about 25 years of time kind of between us, and that's kind of cool. I think that we really, Ball State people, I think, are great. And I mean, we've had, really some good people, and myself, Catherine, Jack, Kate, and Tad. I mean, we're all committed. I mean, we have some common background stuff, but I think we're all moving forward together and learning together, which is really exciting. So we've got actually Perry Howell is on the call as well. He's driving the bus, so he's going to be advancing all the slides. Next, Perry. We actually do have a bigger office. Unfortunately, not everybody's a Ball State grad, but we've been in business for almost 35 years. And I think that we've grown over those 35 years from a handful of people to, we're kind of the largest that we've been in a long time. We're about 26 to 28 people. And I think the right-hand side of the slide is, sorry, Perry, yeah. We try and, I think everybody tries to plug in and engage outside of the office as much as possible. So we kind of keep a tally of all the different organizations that people are involved with. And there's quite a few. I think we're all involved in a lot of different things. We feel like we're a mission-driven firm. We're a for-profit group, but we're really considered mission-driven, and we work with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of for-profit clients. And also, just a quick shout out, it's today's International Women's Day, and our office is typically balanced between 50% women and 50% men, and I think that we really feel proud about that and great, and feel really happy and thankful that we have a lot of strong women in the office that are really advancing the profession, and we want to keep it that way. So thanks. Next. So I think this is actually our physical office. We were just chatting before our talk. We haven't been there kind of officially since last year about this time. And I think we wanted to put this in here just to remind us all that we actually do have a physical space, even though we haven't been there in a while. And we're pretty happy. We've been there a couple of years. We've moved into maybe 2 or 3 different spaces over the years. We're on the west side of the city, in the Kinsey Industrial Corridor, and it's really a transitioning area. It's a really cool area. Historically, it's been light industrial, so there's a lot of loft buildings. Our space was an old florist, a wholesale florist, kind of most recently. But as everybody knows, loft buildings are super great for adaptive and reuse purposes. And we've got a nice big open space, a lot of natural light. And we're pretty excited about, someday soon going back to the office. Also, we're pretty close to transportation. The CTA is a couple blocks away, so we have real super easy access downtown to the building department and everything. I think we did select a name for this, and I think we were trying to figure out, what the best name is. I think this good design for everybody is one mantra that we have, and I think that really extends from design to equity to a lot of different levels in terms of good design. But I think that, we're really fortunate to be able to work in a lot of different neighborhoods in the city. And I think that the notion of collaboration, like all our projects have some kind of engagement typically, and it can be a very grassroots level depending on who the client is. And then we have some sophisticated clients who, there's different types of transformation. But I think that we feel in general housing is an essential platform for a good and healthy life. And as architects, we're able to expand the notion of what housing is in neighborhoods and help co-create impactful projects that respond to the community's needs. And I think we're really excited about that notion. So next, Perry. We've brought together, these are 5 different projects that are they're either recently completed or we're currently working on them. And some of them have extended for many years, like the LBBA Labs. The center of the slide is the map of Chicago. And you can see the loop is kind of right there. Most of our projects do not happen in the loop. Most of our projects are in the neighborhoods that surround the loop. So we've got a host of these 5 different projects that range from the near west side to the far south side. And I think each of us is going to go into those specifically. I think also each of the projects that we've selected has, in addition to the project itself, has kind of a bigger theme that we're interested in, whether it's gentrification or the idea of sustainability. And we'll hit on those different topics with each of the projects. So I think I'll start and then we'll kind of roll into everybody else. So we're going to go way south. So the bottom right, that orange circle, this is the southeast side of Chicago, and it's a neighborhood called South Chicago. And then that's subdivided into smaller little components like the Bush and different things. Next slide. But first, we decided we each are going to do a throwback slide. We thought it was kind of fun, so we dug up some slides back to our CAP days. And the slide on the left is between my 3rd and 4th year, I was super fortunate to be able to work with one of the profs at Ball State, Linda Nelson Keene. And she had this really great project called the Hopewell Center. It's a center in Anderson. It's a nonprofit in Anderson, Indiana, that the group works with developmentally disabled youth. And we cranked away on a set of working drawings the whole summer with a couple of my classmates. And I don't know if J. Bob Taylor is still at Ball State, but J. Bob was involved as well. And it was a super fun summer, and I learned a ton. And then the 2 slides on the right are kind of just thinking about some of the kind of highlights of the studios. We did my first year. Linda Nelson Keene and Marv Roseman ran a studio called Chick, Chick, Chick. And we actually were given little baby chickens. And I'm sure this is totally against all kinds of codes. But up on the 6th floor, we had a brooder, and then we all designed individual houses or homes for the chickens, and we had them on our desks. And there's a couple slides. So that was kind of the memorable first year project that I had. Next slide, Perry. So South Chicago, so this is really an example, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. We we've been really lucky to be able to work with the Claretian Associates, a nonprofit in this part of the city, for probably 15 years. And this map shows kind of all the different types of projects and engagement projects that we've done with them. But even before that, we worked on a rehab, Germano Millgate, back in the 90s. So we've got a really long experience in this neighborhood. It's a really cool neighborhood. It's a steel neighborhood. The the steel was down there. It started in 1901 and was closed down in 1992. So really the whole place was built around the steel industry. It was a totally walkable neighborhood, very dirty neighborhood though. There's a lot of issues with environmental justice and a lot of dumping that happens now. So I think that it's been an underserved neighborhood for a lot of years, and I think that there's some new things happening and that we've been involved with over the years that are looking really interesting. But it's a fascinating part of the city. Next slide, Perry. We've done a lot of neighborhood charrettes and sustainability focused engagement with a lot of the residents. And what's really cool about South Chicago is that it's a working class neighborhood. They're very modest buildings, but there's really a lot of innovation that's happening in South Chicago that flies under the radar. Like people are kind of randomly installing solar panels, and they're really interested in sustainability, not for the trendiness of it, but it's really out of necessity. I think it really comes from the idea that sustainability means to a lot of the residents, you know, recycling, growing their own food. I mean, a lot of things that a lot of communities are interested in, they're already doing. So I think working in this part of the city has been great when we're trying to really start with what exists in positive ways and then kind of building on that. We've worked with residents on a green retrofit charrette. Next one, Perry. We've done some engagement, trying to come up with creative ideas around sustainability and to kind of tease out topics. And it was kind of fun. This one we did an energy Jeopardy, and the winner of the energy Jeopardy at this workshop won an energy audit for their house in the neighborhood. And so that's the resident on the far right. And this guy, Jim Cavallo, is doing some scanning, and it was pretty interesting, but it was kind of real results. So we really tried to deliver things that residents can use in the neighborhood to move forward. We've also done a lot of rehab and preservation of existing buildings in the neighborhood. Again, a lot of the building stock is very modest, but it's rehabable. So this was like a 9 or 10 unit, 100% affordable housing, rental housing for the Claretian Associates. And then we did a nice little corner community center too for art for kids in the neighborhood. And we're also working parallel with some workforce housing. There's a lot of vacant lots around this part of the city. And I think that we're doing infill new construction, but it's modest workforce housing that is single family and 2 flats. And we're using SIP panels, so they go together, they click together really great and really quickly. So that's in progress right now. That's happened. These are for sale. We also are involved with some innovative design ideas with this community. And back in 2015, Chicago had its first biannual exhibit. I'm sure some of you saw that. I think we're on our third one this year. But back then we focused and partnered with the Claretian Associates to come up with some innovative ideas around different types of housing, but really focused on what was needed in the neighborhood. And there's some issues. Food insecurity is a big issue in the neighborhood. There's also a lot of residents and neighborhood folks who make their own food and they sell it on the streets. So we incorporated a teaching kitchen on the corner. The idea of jobs, jobs are needed for the community. We created this notion of a maker's lab to allow experimentation and some workforce stuff happen on site as well. And then also combine both of those things with the notion of tiny homes. We thought that having Vista volunteers kind of move into the neighborhood and spend a year and kind of re-energize the community could be a really nice pairing with these two other things. This is speculative, but it's one thing that we're really hoping that can come to fruition someday. And I think Catherine was mentioning there's going to be an exhibit. Catherine, are you unmuted?
Yes.
When is the exhibit again? Can you maybe just chat?
At the Chicago Architecture Center at the end of May. The exhibit will open at the end of May, assuming the museum opens in person.
Yeah, they've got a lot of great programs, so check that out if you can. Next, Barry. We've also done some non-residential things, and I think we think of these buildings as buildings that support community, so they're super important in the neighborhoods. And this was an adaptive reuse of an old laundromat, cleaners that Sky Art, which is an arts organization that was started by the Claretians about 25 years ago, kind of upgraded and moved into. And it's a really cool bowstring truss building, and it's just full of art. And it's got a really great street presence. There's a lot of glass so you can see in, and a lot of activities. It's really cool. And then we've done, again, more outreach with youth. Next, Perry. Catherine's going to talk about our labs program a little later on, but we've done some things working with youth and studying different parks. We worked one year in 2015 with youth from the neighborhood and from around the city on Steelworkers Park, really brainstorming and shredding ideas for kind of a youth and neighborhood driven activation of an open space. And they spent the summer doing that, and then came up with a presentation, which was really amazing. And I think, a lot of these take a while to get legs, but I think that these are still out there as real projects that are happening. And then we've worked with a group, Architreasures, who's another arts organization with a lot of youth in the neighborhood, essentially allowing youth to kind of invent and run their own projects. We've done a lot of mosaics and a lot of beautification around affordable housing developments in the neighborhood. And this is an example of a couple of the charrettes that we've had, and these are always super fun. I mean, there's just so much energy with young people. It's always a pleasure. And then, so eventually, a lot of this engagement can turn into real projects. And we're actually, we started looking at one street, this kind of commercial corridor on 92nd Street about 10 years ago. And we had, next one, Perry, we had a series of community charrettes, essentially throwing out the idea of what the community wanted to see happen in the neighborhood. And we met in this local bar called Lanagascher, which was a steelworkers bar historically. And it was a huge turnout. So we had 3 of these. One was focused on kind of general neighborhood ideas. And then we kind of drilled down each time looking at buildings and then safety and a lot of different topics, and got some great feedback. Actually did some sketching and some drawing, a lot of note taking, a lot of listening, and then came back to the office and essentially assembled that into an inspirational image, which is the next slide, which was really used to kind of then shop around and kind of gain enthusiasm. And I think that the Claretians found another community affordable housing development partner to develop this next project, which turned into Sacred, which is a fairly large site in South Chicago at 92nd and Burley. It's in the red. And we have about a 75 unit family affordable, 100% affordable housing family project that we're planning right now. Next slide. And we're looking at a grocery store. Again, this neighborhood is essentially a food desert. Food is super important to the residents that came out of the, the direct charrette. So we're looking at activating the pedestrian level with a grocery store, and then having family supportive housing, 72 units for the neighborhood. And that's happening right now. We're getting through the Department of Planning with a zoning change at the moment, but we're super excited about it. It's another shot. That's it. I'm going to pass the baton. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack Schroeder. I'm going to talk about La Casa Norte and kind of focusing on mixed use and combining functions into one space to kind of maximize the impact an organization can make in a place. They're situated in, I guess their work is focused in Humboldt Park and Logan Square, which is kind of northwest of the city. Next slide. Oh, yeah, sorry. This is this is me and two of my best buddies. In 2000, we went on a world trip with Rod Underwood and Daniel Doze. And this is us in Egypt. It was pretty magical trip that touched on 5 continents and, brought us all way closer together. But yeah, I couldn't find any great studio shots, so I had to do a travel shot. But I look back really fondly on those days. This is the project, La Casa Norte. Like I said, the client is focused in Humboldt Park and Logan Square. Their main focus is ending homelessness, fighting homelessness. And they do that in a bunch of different ways. Their mission is all inclusive, kind of both socially and kind of in what they'll provide. And if they can't provide it, they will find an organization that can help anybody that sort of comes in the door. Similar to the last, what Jeff presented, this is a long-standing relationship. It's one of the first jobs I worked on when I left Ball State and came to Landon Baker, was a much smaller shelter with this organization. And the director just kept getting more and more ambitious, and we just kept writing with them. And I think, Jeff, this project is it 10 years kind of from first conversations to complete, I think.
Yeah, I think at least.
Yeah, which is not unusual with nonprofit work, and also something this ambitious. So our mandate on this was to create a building that both inside and out felt as all-inclusive as this organization's mission. So bright, glazed, almost like a collegiate building, a building that brought people in and felt no shame, and really expanded what they could do in the community. This building includes tons of program. The main 2 levels include a food pantry, a teaching kitchen and cafe, a clinic, a teen center, all the administrative offices for La Casa Norte, and a huge chunk of their social service offices are also there. It also includes a massive kind of lecture space that can be used by their organization. And then also the goal is to be able to use that for local political meetings, anything in the community. Next slide. This is just a little zoom in. You get a sense of where this is on North Avenue. The 606 trail is sort of a high line, refurbished, unused train track. So this space, it's gentrifying pretty quickly in this area, but there is still a need for the kind of program that La Casa provides. It's also a food desert. It's also, there's kind of a dearth of health clinics. And their function, as stuff gentrifies, they're looking more west and south to keep helping people in this area. Next slide. There you can see our building. It's kind of bottom right. You can see where we are in the city compared to the Loop. They always talk about Chicago being sort of a city of neighborhoods. You can also see the bulk of our building and how kind of massive it is, because we we needed to get all of that function into one space, which meant going through 3, maybe 4 levels of zoning. We were too large, our use wasn't accepted, we were underparked, we didn't have enough yard in any direction. So with kind of political will and good ideas, we were able to push through and get the project that the client wanted. One thing we did, and you can kind of see it here and maybe even more from the street, was start to step this thing back so that at least this front portion of the building felt kind of in line with what surrounded it. And those tiers step back to have like a roof deck. And you can kind of start to see here that there's an interior courtyard that serves the residences on the upper 3 levels. Because we didn't have any space on either side to put windows, all of our natural light and ventilation comes from the court. Next slide. Just really quickly in the plans, I think the amount of colors shows you the amount of program that was really kind of shoehorned into the space. The main entry, these are the first 2 levels. The main entry is there, great open lobby, and all the yellow is what we sort of called the street that connects all these functions. And then the same thing happens at the 2nd level. It's a 2-story space that connects. So while this building had to be very secure and everything needs to be isolated, we tried to keep as much sort of connectivity and openness as we could. Next slide. And then this is getting into the upper level. So the blue is the residences. It was a mix of studios and 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. And you can see that interior court that has skylights that punch down into the offices and hallways below. These were, I think the sort of jagged lines and stuff came from the client. We came with some more rational sort of plans throughout the process, and her instinct was that felt like affordable housing. So what can we do to sort of add more interest back into the space? So each unit has its own sort of unique layout and feel. Some are connected to the street, some to the alley, and some to that main court. And the kind of purple space is what I was talking about earlier, the large community space with its own kitchen. And again, that's isolated from the residents. It's only accessed from the public side. Next. The building was certified LEED Gold. I think, in a pretty low-key way. It's super insulated, really great glazing, efficient plumbing fixtures, lighting, really choosing all the right materials on the inside. So it was kind of an affordable LEED Gold. We were actually shooting for silver, and we're able to get to that point. This section kind of shows you that 2-story lobby space, the 2 levels of public, the community space at the front, and then the residences surrounding the courtyard. So I think this is a cool diagram of how this complicated space kind of lays out. Next. These are just some finished shots of interior spaces. The big lobby is top left. The teen center is in the middle there with the cylinder lights. You can get a sense of the residential court there with the green roof and the bubble skylights. Down below that is one of the units, really simple kind of loft style units. It is permanent supportive housing, but their hope is that this was a step to other levels of housing for folks. So it's comfortable but durable, and the idea is that it's a step in the people's life. That the teaching kitchen and cafe is in that next space, and then their offices are kind of to the left there, and you get a sense of the pretty cool skylights popping down. I think kind of parroting what Jeff was saying, I mean, these relationships are so long and so great. This was the topping off celebration on site. You start to feel like these are just old friends. And I think it's one of my favorite things about working in this office is that you form these really human relationships. It's not, I say client, but I mean, it doesn't feel like this really hard client architect relationship. So it's really a joy, and I've been here since I was at Ball State, basically. So obviously I've enjoyed it and continue to. Next. Oh, and this is just more of that connection. This is a bunch of our staff. I think Kate's there, Jeff's there. Going back to this is the original shelter that we did, and preparing a meal and spending some time with the young men that live there. So yeah, it's totally sustaining to work on these things, and you're almost sad when they're done and you can't wait for the next one. So I believe that's it.
Great. My name is Lanagascher, and I'm going to talk about Emmett Street apartments. They're actually not too far from La Casa. They're just kind of northeast in the Logan Square neighborhood. It's a 100-unit, all affordable project, 7 stories, and it was really driven by the alderman to sort of as a response to the gentrifying neighborhood. Logan Square is very popular, and I'll talk a little bit more of that in a minute. And it's been gentrifying for some time now. Can you go to the next slide, Barry? Oh, yeah. These are some throwbacks. On the left is me after graduation from undergrad, and on the right, we are in Cinque Terre as part of Capitalia. I believe that was 2008 with Tim Gray. So you can go to the next slide. So this is a rendering of Emmett. It's currently in construction. I'll show you some photos towards the end. You can kind of get a sense of the building as I talk a little bit more about it. So one of the really nice things is it's a mix of 1 to 3 bedroom units. There's apartments and there's townhomes, and that's really a response to the neighborhood makeup. This has historically been a Latinx family neighborhood. So as part of the response to gentrification, it was really important to provide a wide range. So there will be families living in this building with kids, potentially multi-generational as well. So that was really important. This is also, actually go to the next slide, Barry. This is also a transit-oriented development, which I'll show you kind of what that means in the next slide here. But this is kind of the character of Logan Square. As I mentioned, it's a very desirable neighborhood. It's got great access to public transit. It's got nightlife. It's got restaurants. It's got shopping, theater. The historic Logan Square Theater is there. It's also part of the Chicago Boulevard system that was conceptualized back in the 1800s. So there's great amenities to park space, and it's actually a Chicago landmark. Jack mentioned the 606, that's nearby as well, the elevated train line. And there's just a lot of great amenities here. So, recently, in recent history, the Latinx population has been starting to get pushed out. 2017 census data actually was the first time that it showed the white resident population had surpassed the Latinx population, 46 to 44%. And this goes back starting, in the early 2000s, young white professionals wanted to move in, the rents were affordable, the blue line takes you right downtown, and it started pushing out the Latinx family as they were, driving up rent prices, and they no longer could afford to stay there. So this trend has only continued and only gotten worse, and now it's one of the more expensive neighborhoods to live in. And our client is Bickerdick Redevelopment Corporation. They're a not-for-profit community development corporation that was actually founded by residents of this neighborhood back in 1967. And originally they were founded to serve low and moderate income residents during a time where the city was deteriorating with widespread unemployment, poverty, and rising crime. And I think it's really interesting that today they're still involved in this neighborhood, and they're continuing their mission to provide quality, affording housing in these areas that are rapidly gentrifying, to prevent displacement from the families that live there. And actually in their time that they've been working in this neighborhood, they've preserved or created over 2,000 units of affordable housing, which I think is pretty incredible. So here is the map of kind of where the site sits. You'll see that in orange. Along Milwaukee Avenue is where all those nice vibrant shops, restaurants, nightlife, and everything is. It's a really great location. There's also a blue L line stop just south of the site. So it's a transit-oriented development. Because it's so close to a stop, it really gives us a break on some parking. So we do have some parking, but it's a lot less than we would need for a typical building of this scale. And that really allowed us to utilize the site quite a bit better. Go on to the next slide. So this is what the site looked like prior to any intervention. So it's this really great location, and it's just a city-owned parking lot. So the community involvement really comes into this piece as, before we ever got involved in the project, the community worked with the alderman to decide what should go here. And, as a collective whole, the community decided that affordable housing was very important and should be on this prime location. So from the beginning, this project has been community-based and community-born. And the Alderman Rosa is, very committed to making sure that his constituents are part of the process. So typically, we see a lot of community meetings in the work that we do. What's sort of atypical of this process, as you can see from this photo, is, normally we expect a dozen, maybe 24 people at these meetings. This meeting had over 600 people that attended. So that's how involved this community is in sort of, fighting for what they believe should be there, and really they're there to be engaged, which is really, really unique and really great. So even though we have this overwhelming support, that doesn't mean that there weren't challenges. There were definitely some constituents that, made themselves heard and were sort of with a NIMBY mentality, trying to fight against it. But overall, the support was just so overwhelming that the project was able to push forward. And Bickerdick, once they were involved, after the community decided what should be there, and Bickerdick brought the design team together, and they really took that energy and kept pushing it forward through many other hurdles we had to get through in the design process. So I'll take you through what the building kind of looks like now. So here's an aerial view. You can see where Milwaukee Avenue is, and then kind of in the lower left is where the blue line stop is. So it's a pretty big building, and we started looking at the massing and how it could respond to some of the context. So towards the kind of lower part of your screen, towards Kedzie, that's really where the big, tall 7-story tower is. And on the ground there is where we have retail, which was also born out of what the community wanted. They wanted to see some retail on the ground floor. And sort of the plan is that local shops or cafes can come in here and support, the local residents that have businesses. But then as you start to taper more north towards the other end of the site, the building starts stepping down. This is where we really kind of get into the residential sized buildings. We've got single family homes across the street. We've got an apartment building to the north that's 4 stories. So we really tried to make it respond to that context. We also pulled it back. You can see the angle of the building that creates these nice yard spaces for what is townhomes actually along that area. So it also gives it a little breathing room from the street. If you want to go to the next slide, Perry. So here's the first floor plan and site plan. In the purple there to the left we have 2-story townhomes on the ground floor, and you can see those yard spaces. The orange is actually a community room that can be used by both the residents and other members of the community. Light blue is sort of the pass through between north where you see the Emmett Street, and then there's also access from the alley. And then that light yellow over to the right is all the retail space. So there's quite a bit there, and it's really facing that busy Kedzie Avenue space. And you do see we do have a little bit of parking from the alley there, but as I mentioned, that was greatly reduced given the transit-oriented development status. I'm gonna go to the next one. So here's a view. We're further north on Kedzie Avenue, now kind of Emmett Avenue looking back towards Kedzie. The darker gray is where we've kind of weaved the townhomes in, and then above that, and then further down the street, those are all flat units, just traditional apartment style. As I mentioned, 1 to 3 bedrooms. The townhomes are 3 bedrooms. So there's definitely a mix of styles of different units. I'm gonna go to the next one. And then here's a look kind of at that corner back towards Kedzie, where we have the retail space. So as I mentioned, community engagement was really important throughout the beginnings in the design process. And, in the future, Bickerdick will go and work with the community to put some murals in, which you see kind of depicted as artwork here on the columns and they're kind of throughout the ground floor. So that's kind of another way to keep the community engagement, going through once once construction is over. Can you go to the next one? So as I mentioned, this is under construction. It's a precast building, so it's been pretty fun to watch because it goes up really fast. It's a kit of parts. But here we're kind of looking at the shorter side of the building, looking back towards Logan Square. Milwaukee Avenue is kind of to the right side of the photo there. If you go to the next one, you can really kind of get a sense of how it fits in. So here's a picture from the actual square itself looking back. And so you can see while it is a massive building, it really does fit into the context in this, very tightly woven, very dense neighborhood. So it's great. It's providing 100 units, as I mentioned, of affordable housing, and it really allows some of the families to stay there. I think that's Emmett.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tad. I am the youngest of the crew today. I would like to talk a little bit about West Haven Park, which is located in Chicago's near west side near the United Center. Again, another affordable CHA project, and it's part of the CHA's plan for transformation of public housing and looking at how all these issues of gentrification that we've been talking about all of this lecture, looking at efforts to curb that and looking at ways to reintroduce CHA tenants through the Hope 6 grant and various other agencies to get them back to where they, if they would so choose to live. So next slide, Barry. These about me ones are throwing me off a little bit. So that's me back in 2013, my wife at CAP, and then it's me in studio. Probably looks a little different. So this is what we've been working on. Perry, go to the next slide. Maybe is it missing one? Yeah, this is a good starting point. So again, this is a transit-oriented development project. So you saw the location in regards to the loop. It's a highly accessible area next to the West Loop, which is a very hot neighborhood as well. And right next to the United Center. And it's actually kind of incredible that you can see Damon Avenue, where this project is located, at Lake and Damon. There is not currently a Green Line station there. They're proposing to put one in, and it's been in the works for some time. But for the longest time, this has kind of been a looked over area in the city. And it's been proposed to put a new station in, hopefully within our project timeline. But we really wanted to add to this TOD in terms of not only just introducing residents back into the west side of Chicago, but really looking at how that could be a part of the neighborhood and how that can bring some vibrancy back. And currently the site is pretty, it's pretty sparse. There is some development and there's been some things going on. I think it's a good thing to note that this is now, was once the Henry Horner homes. So Henry Horner homes were a tower in the park concept from the 60s, and kind of, were started off with the best intentions of these, public housing that had suffered neglect and left a lot of stigma and hardship towards those who lived there. And you can actually see on the image on the upper right, those towers are very close to where our site is located. Those have been since demolished. So what our project is part of is this larger West Haven development, which is looking at trying to reintegrate new public housing and affordable housing for, and also market rate housing to the area. Next slide. So we, again, studied a lot of different design options here to kind of really get into how do you activate this neighborhood, understanding that it will be a future Green Line stop. And, there's going to be a lot of traffic coming to and from the United Center for various sporting events and concerts and things like that. So we really wanted to look at how the pedestrian experience plays a really crucial role in the design of this project. So one of the things that we were looking at initially was how do we take, this building that's just going to be comprised of 96 units, 1s and 2 bedrooms. How do we, it's going to be a rather large massing, accommodate for a welcoming gateway to this community. And one of the things that we originally looked at was the site, the ground plane rather, and how that, what can we do to push that back and give some relief to the pedestrian experience, people getting off the train, and then including all sorts of program like retail. We have a pretty ample bike storage, 96 bike stalls, which is great. And then looking at putting the units above, and then some other ancillary community spaces on the second level. So it really becomes this idea of pushing the mass and offsetting it so you're getting light in the corridors and really having this kind of more stepped back mass that kind of speaks to the language of what's happening on the street and creating a front porch, so to speak, of the design. Next. So you can kind of see some of these moves in the site plan where you're seeing, we have pushed the front tower portion and alleviated and gave the pedestrians roughly 10 feet of walking space instead of having, jamming them next to the Damon, which is a pretty busy street. So you can kind of see the other pieces of the building as well. And another big thing about this project is like all the pieces of the West Haven development are, they vary from, 2-story developments, townhomes to full blown out towers nearby. So there's a lot of scales to try to kind of connect together. And one of the things that our building does is in the lower southern portion of it, it steps down to kind of match the scale of all the buildings along Maypole. Next. So here you can start to see some of the activity that we envisioned for the site. As of last week, we have just issued DD on this project, so no construction photos yet, but soon to come. We are, so this is kind of showing some future retail and a bus stop nearby. And you can kind of see where the entry canopy is for the tenants to come in. And what could be with it standing at the Green Line future stop. And here's that entry area with a steel trellis above. Again, like Emmett, this is a precast concrete building. So it's going to be a kit of parts. And one of the things that we're really kind of interested on this particular project is getting a nice stone ground finish for this face. They almost look like black granite, sandblasted texture to the ground floor panels to kind of give, again, another tactile and material experience for people walking by, and really kind of, express the design through these pilasters on the faces of these panels, these like black fingers is what we've been calling them, and understanding how these kind of things, these two programs kind of seamlessly bleed together to one, show the intensity of some of the urban pieces of this project, like the L, and bridging that to something that's the quaintness of a home. And here's the aerial image of it, looking from the L tracks, looking west.
Great. So I'm going to wrap up. Hopefully some of you are still with us through this. But what I thought I'd do is kind of bring it all home and talk a little bit about how the experience at Ball State kind of gave us all the ability to do this type of work. And this is what we call the LBBA labs, which is really a summer program for about 5 to 6 high school students and college level mentors who do kind of research for us. They're kind of our research arm on our different projects. Here, he can continue. So here's our flashback. In my case, we went back to high school. I'm on the left there, and the person next to me was my roommate in the program, who's now our client here in Chicago. I think we only became roommates because her last name started with an A and mine started with a B. So became roommates. And another one of my best friends was in this program too. So those high school memories, pretty strong. And then it's now called Design Works, which is the image at the top right. So maybe some of you participated in that. Maybe I actually came to visit some of your classes. Continue. So I think why this was kind of important, again, like how to think about architecture in a personal way. In high school, my high school was a small high school, and we didn't really think about design. We didn't think about equity, any of that. And I think I was a very angry high school student. So when it came to Ball State for the summer program, I met all these other people and all these professors who really thought about how do we make things better through design thinking. And it was really pivotal to me, but I didn't know how pivotal it was until much later, after I had an opportunity to start teaching high school students. In this case, it was with Marwin. And Marwin's an arts organization here in Chicago, and they teamed up with UIC, University of Illinois Chicago, to try and really get some of the high school students ramped up before they went into college. So it was teaching high school kids. And unbeknownst to me, why I hated high school attending it, I really, really liked teaching high school students. So taught this class for about 10 years, and it was all year long. And it was just absolutely a lot of fun. Or if you can continue. And then worked with the Chicago Architecture Center in creating a new handbook. The Chicago Public Schools had been using a book from the 1950s, how to design a vacation house, which had nothing to do with any of these students' experiences in life. So we actually created this handbook, which was more about design thinking. And then the new house competition is the image on the left, which is a high school competition in the city. So I'd had quite a bit of experience working with high school students. But unfortunately, that program, the Marwin program, ended. And we really thought, can we think about how that program, can we think about how to continue that program? And one interesting feature that happened out of that, we had the high school students do a post-occupancy evaluation of a single room occupancy building that we had designed. And the students, the questions they came up with and the answers they came up with were just startling to us. They got all this information that we wouldn't have gotten if we had gone in there with our clipboards and asked them questions. And so we really started thinking, can we create a program where we're hiring high school students and letting them be a research arm on real projects. So these are projects that are actually happening in the office. High school students know when you're, just wasting their time and for whatever reason. So it was meant to be something that was going to actually happen in the office, and the students could be out on site acting as research for us. So one of the funny things is like they'll wear lab coats when they're out on the street. And and some of these neighborhoods are not the best neighborhoods. So kind of diffuses a little bit of tension perhaps. If you see some kids out here with lab coats, it's like, what are you doing? And then that opens up a dialogue of like what they're doing, and they can get some answers from people who are out and about. Great, if you could continue. So this is kind of the typical design process. You get stakeholders, it goes to the developer, the architect, and then we get to the final design. So what the lab program does is we kind of turn it upside down a little bit and have this other filter with the high school students. And again, high school students, they'll be very blunt, they'll ask questions, they'll tell you exactly what they feel, and they'll give you answers that you may not want to hear. So it's good as a filter. And then it kind of transfers back down, and then we get to a final design. What's great about this is it also really affects our clients, because we're hiring a lot of the students from the neighborhoods. And these are students who are, maybe residents of the projects that we're working on too. So it's good for us, and it's good for our clients also. Continue. So we've done 10 of these so far, so one each year, so 10 years of programming, which has been great. And you can see we've done projects all over the city. The little green dots are where the programs have been. If you want to continue. And then these are the high schools. We've had students from over 30 high schools participate in this program. And so it's great because again, we learn a lot about different parts of the neighborhood. We obviously can't live in every neighborhood when you're designing a project. But so it's great to hear what the kids have to say about these neighborhoods. And what's also interesting is we've had a couple students who were actually went to the same high school, but had never even talked to each other. And then they actually ended up interacting in the labs program, which is fun. If you want to continue. So this kind of follows up with what Tad was talking about, the Henry Horner homes. This is a project we did with the labs program with West Haven. And you can see the United Center, you can see where this is in relationship to the loop. And those high rises are gone now. Want to continue? Here it is again on another map. I'd give you a little more perspective. Want to continue? And then this was one of the first phases of the West Haven Park project was called the Villages. And it was actually built in 1996. And we did not work on it. It was probably one of the first new urbanism design type projects in the city. And it was up for rehab about 5 years ago. So, Harry, if you want to continue. So as we looked at it, there were some problem areas in the project, and Maypole Park was identified as one of the problem areas. Harry, if you want to continue. This is just a tiny little park within it. And as you can see, it was a park in name and not in anything else. It was, there was some playground equipment thrown in the corner, there's some benches just sitting out there baking in the sun. The playground equipment was in poor shape. Obviously, no one used it. Continue. So, we really wanted to make this a park that felt like part of the renovation. So here are the students. The students came up with some questions like, what would residents want to see in this park and how would they want to use it? And we heard back that, no one actually felt like they wanted to use the park. So we looked at what did each age group tenants or residents want to see in the park. So we interviewed children, teens, adults, and seniors to see what they all wanted. And it seemed like the best way to make this park successful was to make sure that every age group had a reason to be in the park and could use the park at the same time. Unfortunately, the children that you can see, they wanted the pool, which is that blue line. They didn't get a pool, but nice. It was a nice thought. So again, the students went out. They're in our office for 6 weeks in the summer. They're out interviewing, talking to residents out on site, just seeing what was going on, which is something that we would not be able to do. Like we can't take a full day off and sit around and just watch what's going on. But the students are able to do that. So if you continue. So then they started taking these ideas and actually, designing the park. I'm gonna continue. And this is kind of what they came up with. There's this cut through the park, and so they decided to create a path, and then they kind of zoned the area around the path, and then they had little areas. There was a grilling area at the bottom right. I think that was a lazy river, that blue piece, which didn't get incorporated, but again, a nice idea. And then the playground and just different ways for people to be in the park, interacting, and yet having individual spaces. Continue. And then this is from our landscape architect. This is what the park actually ended up looking like. You can see that pathway. There are benches with trees. So if you were sitting there watching your kids in the park or on the playground equipment, you had some shade. There's a canopy with grill station. And then there are some garden plots over to the right. Continue. And then here's an axon that we did, just a model of what the park could look like. Continue. And then here it is in real life. So again, you can see that a lot of people can use the park. An empty space is kind of dangerous. It feels dangerous. So by having a lot of people, able to use the park and participate, makes it a much safer place to be. Continue. And then here are some of the seniors gardening. But again, you can see even on the background, like you can see some of the people behind the fence. They feel very safe and just being seen and seeing people and interacting. So we think it was a success. And a lot of that came from what we heard from the students. I'm going to continue. And so here are some of the different programs. Again, we've had 10 years of this now. So we've, had 50 students, college level mentors. What's interesting is we've had about 5 of the students go on to architecture school. But what we've heard is that now the students feel like they can look around their communities and see things that maybe see things that are good and then see things that are bad, and then feel like they have a voice to, you know, to verbalize what they're seeing and how they might change that. So even if they don't become architects, hopefully they'll be knowledgeable community participants. So when they're at Kate's community meeting, you know, they'll have something to say other than there's not enough parking. So, but anyways, that was like a really long way of telling you how Ball State, I think the summer program at Ball State really affected me and gave me, I think, the skills and the tools to think about how we as architects can use design thinking a little bit more creatively in our practices. I think that's it.
This is great. Thank you very much. We do have some questions in the chat. And again, if anyone wants to add, just please do. But I think you touched on it, Catherine. Gary's asking how many went on to architecture programs? You said 3 or 6.
And what's been interesting is once they go into architecture school, a lot of those students have come back as mentors. So they started out, like we've known some since they were in high school, and then they come back and they mentor through their college years. And then they usually stay on for maybe a year and do an internship in our office. And then we kind of kick them out of the nest. We hope to kick them out of the nest and hopefully go to another firm and try out different experiences. But there've been about 5 total, which.
And
And so
Catherine, we've seen
you're
people
actually
go into the,
hiring-
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jack.
Oh, I was just saying, we've seen some folks go into the trades and graphics, and, you know, I mean, it branches out from there, and not everybody's made for, you know, architecture school or whatever, but I think it does have an impact for sure. And, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, I was just curious if your firm actually pays for the college students. You employ them, and then they in turn teach the students. That's excellent. Wow.
Yeah, what we found from that Marwin program was it went the last period of high school and then went beyond the school day, and students have to work. And so those students who had to work couldn't participate. And I just thought that was, you know, that was just really sad, that to think you're going to be denied this opportunity because you have to work. So obviously the paid, you know, the high school students are paid, the college students are paid. Yeah, it's.
Catherine, you forgot one of the most important aspects, the Wednesday lunches. All the kids go shopping at, you know, farmer's market or market and prepare food as a group together in the office kitchen. And then we all eat lunch, and they kind of update the office through a presentation. It's super great.
Yeah, that came about because Pete Landon, as we were developing it, he was like, so we're going to just eat pizza every Wednesday? It's like, no, we can do it every day. We can send the students out to go to the farmer's market and make lunch. So.
There's some other questions, both of which touch on ideas of affordability. One is, what is your viewpoint on efficient architectural housing where you stack all the same units? Do you want to break from that, I guess, or is that a part of the affordability approach? So anything about affordability?
Who wants to jump in on that one?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Did
you have some?
I can start. No, yeah, I mean, I think that we're always thinking about affordability, but it's a moving target and it's never the same. I mean, there are, you know, things that you want to do, like, you know, you do have to try and stack units and kind of fundamentally align things so that things can flow through easily. But that's where I think we break from that, and we really try and push the envelope as much as we can. And a lot of times we're working with general contractors and clients simultaneously. Most of our jobs are negotiated, so we're getting, you know, potentially real-time feedback. And I think that we're able to, you know, work different ideas and try and be creative as a team to kind of combat the just endless repetition on stuff. I mean, I think one example is what Jack was talking a little bit about on that Casa Norte project, where we came in, we were trying to be really responsible with our layout, and Sol, our client, just said, like, what are you doing? You know, like, you have to be more creative, because creativity translates to individuality. And she really saw it as a dignity thing. She wanted the residents of this building to have, you know, their place and it to be unique and dignified. So I think that that's the challenge, is finding the balance point of that.
I think to also insert public space, you know, and ideally in kind of random places, and be paying attention to the negative space that's not those stacks. And you can gain a lot of interest just from kind of giving back a unit or two here and there on different floors and kind of providing different programming throughout the building.
I think one thing to mention too is just, you know, kind of getting to the nitty gritty of finishes and colors. You know, we try to make sure that these spaces are warm and welcoming. You know, a lot of times we don't have huge budgets, but, you know, we utilize paint, we utilize material changes to really make spaces warm so they don't feel sterile.
So
And then another thing that, sorry about that. Another thing is to make what seems like little moves in the beginning become big moves. So for instance, on the West Haven project, lighting the corridors meant that we needed to shift the masts away from each other. So we had these two kind of stacked tower masses, right? And if we want to have the feeling of safety and visibility in what is kind of always seen as a dingy, like bad space in the corridor, and get light and illuminate that, we had to move the building away. And that's kind of locked us into some sort of place early on to like, okay, well, we have this and we need this. And this is kind of driving some of those decisions.
You know, I think like affordable housing back in the day really was thought about as kind of minimum standards. And even over time with our firm, I mean, we've seen more, you know, we always wrestle with the term affordable housing, and nobody really knows what that means because we all need affordable housing. So we're really focused on housing, and a lot of what we do is mixed income these days. So it's a mix of things. So the idea, I think both sides have benefited from that kind of shift in the way we look at housing. You know, both sides, the market rate and affordability, that, I mean, we're learning from each other, I think.
I'm waiting. Okay, I know we'll probably have to wrap up soon, but I'm curious about what a skill, I mean, your practice is so diverse. I mean, you're talking economics, Jeff, you just, you know, how to develop sort of by looking at different user groups, you're meeting people, everyone's meeting people. Is there a skill set that a student of architecture and design in general should pursue while they're in school to, you know, hit this firm and be able to contribute right away? People oriented, I don't know, what is it that students need to succeed in the type of practice that you guys are practicing?
I might jump in a little bit because I think when we do these presentations, it feels like we might be leading some of these projects when we really have great clients who can figure out the financing. They're doing the upfront work, the community activity to just see what's needed. And then our role is to interpret that and build or design, you know, design to code, design to accessibility, make sure no one's left out of the building, and just be really good architects. But I think we have to have an open-mindedness that these projects take a long time. So, you know, you're not going to start and it's not going to be your design, but it's going to get a lot of influence from a lot of different people, city organizations, funders, the community. And then technically, I think everyone in our office is just really, really good technically and design-wise. Like you can put a building together, make sure it doesn't leak. That sounds boring, but it's critical in this type of housing, because if these buildings start falling apart, what's the point? What's the point of having an architect who picks out a nice color if, you know, the windows are leaking? So again, I think in the end, everyone here, and especially I think the Ball State students or Ball State, the people we have here from Ball State come with a really good technical experience and a willingness to work hard to achieve that.
I would say too, like, you know, the idea of communication is pretty big. Like, not getting too kind of narrow with your focus about designing buildings, kind of out of the context of a much bigger picture, if that makes sense. You know, and that being able to talk to all kinds of people, kind of, and understand how you need to communicate ideas. Because we're really trying to sell things, and you know, ideas that sometimes are difficult to wrap your head around. So I would say, you know, presenting, writing, just communicating in general is huge. And then, you know, being open to kind of identifying different connections, again, that go beyond just designing a building. I mean, we think of it as kind of going beyond the property boundary of your project and really kind of looking at the big picture. So I think getting experience, non-architectural experience, as much as possible is good too.
Have you ever had to take a stand on a client coming to you with ideas of gentrification that just, you know, bothered you to the soul and you had to turn them down, or you'll take it all?
We've definitely turned stuff down on principle at times. I mean, again, maybe we're sort of broken record on this, but relationships matter so much to us, you know, and to the point where if we do have a client that's a little more edgy, it's like we don't know what to do with ourselves. You know, we're so used to collaboration and really working together. So no, we have turned, I don't know about, I mean, to be honest, the gentrification thing, that work doesn't come our way very often, but we have had other reasons, you know, to sort of opt out of a proposal or something like that.
Well, any last words? Again, I can't thank you enough. Great. You have a student here is interested in interning with you, Jeff.
All right. Oh, actually, Perry wanted me to mention, you know, everybody check out our website, and we're on Instagram and things. I mean, like, because I think we're trying to engage and just talk about what we're doing. And so that's out there, and please check it out.
Will do. Well, thanks.
Great.
Thank you. This was fun.
Nice to see you, Andrea.
Thanks,
Dave.
everybody.
Jack. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.